2%, that's the number. Not a valuation, not a growth rate, a fee. 2% of total funds committed, paid annually to the managers of every major venture capital fund in the world, regardless of whether a single company in the portfolio ever makes a dime. How much money are we talking about? Andreessen Horowitz, the most powerful venture firm in Silicon Valley, manages $46 billion in assets. At 2%, that's roughly $920 million a year guaranteed, risk-free, before a single bet pays off, before a single product ships. And they're not alone. In 2024, 67 specialized AI venture funds raised $12 billion in new capital. 2% of $12 billion is $240 million a year in guaranteed fees from just 1 year's crop of AI-specific funds. By 2025, over $200 billion had flowed into AI ventures globally. Once you understand what that number incentivizes, what it rewards, what it ignores, and what it structurally requires, you'll understand why every financial bubble isn't an accident. It's a business model. In the last episode, I showed you why your brain needs billionaires to be geniuses. Today, I'm going to show you why the financial system needs them even more, and why the people running the money machine are disincentivized to ever turn it off. Your pension fund is a limited partner in these funds, your university endowment, your state retirement system. The 2% comes out of their commitment, which means it comes out of your future. You're paying guaranteed fees to managers whose primary incentive is to raise the biggest pool of capital they possibly can. The middleman's cut across history. The 2% feels modern. It isn't. It's the latest version of a structural position that's existed for 3 centuries. In every speculative mania I've examined, there's a class of financial middlemen whose compensation is decoupled from whether the investment succeeds or fails. They profit from the volume of the activity, not the quality of the outcome. The mechanism changes, the structural position doesn't. In 1720, stock jobbers in Exchange Alley hawked shares in bubble companies for a commission. Schemes for trading hair, insuring horses, improving the art of making soap, a wheel for perpetual motion. The jobbers collected their cut whether the company lasted a year or vanished the next morning. In the 1840s, railway promoters floated schemes with 10% deposits, retained large share allocations, and extracted premiums before the first rail was laid. George Hudson, the railway king, paid dividends to old investors from the capital of new ones. A Ponzi scheme. £750,000 embezzled. A third of the authorized railways were never built. The promoters had already been paid. In 2000, the same investment bank that took a company public published research recommending its stock. Analysts maintained buy ratings on companies generating lucrative banking fees. The 2003 global settlement fined 12 major banks. The underlying incentive survived the intervention. 3 centuries, commissions, deposits, underwriting fees, management fees. The costume changes, the middleman's cut doesn't. But the modern version does something the historical cases didn't. It doesn't just profit from the bubble, it manufactures the fuel the bubble runs on. And I can show you exactly how the fuel is made. The fuel, how the fee structure manufactures its own numbers. The fund manager's primary financial incentive isn't to find the best companies, it's to raise the largest fund. The bigger the pool, the bigger the guaranteed fee. And the fastest way to raise a massive fund is to tell your limited partners, the pension funds, the endowments, the sovereign wealth funds, that you are positioned at the absolute forefront of the next technological revolution. This breeds herd behavior by design. When capital starts flowing into a narrative-rich sector, VCs are structurally incentivized to follow the herd. The cost of missing the herd vastly exceeds the cost of the herd being wrong because the 2% pays either way. In 2024, AI captured a third of all global venture funding. 1/3 of all venture funding. Generative AI funding alone nearly doubled from $24 billion to $45 billion in a single year. And there's an acronym the industry uses to justify it. 3 letters, TAM, Total Addressable Market. If you're building a godlike intelligence, an infinite wealth machine as the pitch goes, then the TAM is by definition infinite. And when the TAM is infinite, the power law arithmetic says any bet is rational. You're not investing in a company, you're staking a claim on El Dorado. We're going to come back to the TAM in a later episode because it's the financial engine that drives the fusion energy story too. Same spreadsheet, same arithmetic, same Mirage, but that's ahead. For now, here's what the fee structure manufactures in the present tense. Anthropic. In March 2026, their CFO filed an affidavit in a federal lawsuit sworn under penalty of perjury, disclosing that the company's total revenue to date was exceeding $5 billion. That's all the money the company has ever made since it was founded. Across every product, every customer, every dollar that has ever entered their bank account. Days earlier, the company had told investors to expect $19 billion annually. Bloomberg confirmed it. The limited partners saw it. The next fund was raised on the back of it. Both numbers are legally true. Here's how. Through the legalized illusion of software accounting. You take your single best 28-day window of server consumption, multiply it by 13, and project a fantasy year. In traditional software, that's called an annualized run rate. It's a standard accounting tool for measuring growth. But AI isn't traditional software. When you have sky-high enterprise churn and your usage is heavily subsidized by billions in venture capital, taking your best month and projecting a fantasy year is a magic trick. They're valuing a cash-incinerating, heavy industry compute furnace as if it were a zero marginal cost software platform. $5 billion total, more than $60 billion invested, a valuation of $380 billion. That's the arithmetic the 2% fee structure needs you to never see. So the fee structure incentivizes the herd. The herd demands impressive numbers, and the system manufactures the numbers the herd demands. But this raises a question the numbers alone can't answer. What kind of business is this 2% actually keeping alive? The inversion. The economics are upside down. There's an equation that should alarm every investor in this space. But first, the equation that made the internet work. Every new user of the web made the industry more profitable. Every generation of web technology cost less to run than the last. The economics ran downhill. The more people used it, the better the math got. That's how you build a real industry. AI has inverted that equation. Unlike the web, AI doesn't scale to zero. Their infrastructure costs scale much faster than their revenue. Every new generation of the technology, every breakthrough model requires incinerating exponentially more cash than the one before it. The smarter the model gets, the more billions they have to burn just to keep the supercomputers from going dark. The more successful the product becomes, the faster the company bleeds capital to support the compute load. So what keeps the machine running? Not customers, not revenue, capital, new money from new investors, flowing through the same fee structure we just dissected. The bubble isn't a malfunction, it's a life support system. Pull the plug and the patient flatlines. HSBC, not a bearish blog, not an angry YouTuber. HSBC ran the numbers. Even if OpenAI converts 1 in 5 of its users to paid subscribers, which would be extraordinary for any consumer tech product in history, they're still $207 billion short. The gap between what they must spend and what they can earn from customers isn't closable through product revenue. It's only closable through continued investment. Inverted economics, a revenue gap closable only by investors. So the obvious question, if the economics are this broken, why hasn't the whole thing fallen over? The centrifuge, why it hasn't collapsed. SoftBank, Oracle, and CoreWeave have collectively borrowed about $30 billion to keep OpenAI's infrastructure running. CoreWeave borrowed to build data centers. SoftBank borrowed to invest. Oracle borrowed to host. Each company's solvency depends on OpenAI's continued fundraising. OpenAI's continued fundraising depends on investor confidence. Investor confidence depends on the revenue narrative. And the revenue narrative depends on a 28-day extrapolation that a financial reporter had to explain to the public because the company wouldn't. This isn't an engine. An engine converts fuel into forward motion. This is a centrifuge. Capital enters, spins at high speed, picks up a new label with every pass: investment, infrastructure, partnership, revenue. But very little ever actually exits the loop. The Financial Times called it a money pit with a website on top. Now, there is a sophisticated counter-argument of sorts. The financial analyst Patrick Boyle looks at this web of mutual dependency and reaches for a comparison. The Japanese Keiretsu, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, interlocking corporations that share risk and create stability through mutual investment. And Boyle is right that the structure rhymes, but here's the distinction he makes as a warning, not a defense. A real Keiretsu was an engine. Toyota sold enough Camrys to families in Ohio to actually pay for the factories. External revenue sustained the system. The AI Keiretsu has customers, sure, but nowhere near enough Camrys to pay for a $5 trillion build-out. So the vast majority of the capital just circulates between interconnected parties at high velocity, each pass adding a new label. But the question the centrifuge can't answer is, who is the ultimate customer? The one outside the loop, paying with money earned somewhere else at a scale large enough to pay off the debt. Now, if you've been following my AI Crash Report series, you've seen me describe this structure differently, as a circular firing squad. Armed figures in a circle, each one aiming at someone else, each one unable to move without triggering a cascade. That's the fragility of the system. What I'm adding here is the machinery underneath the standoff, the fee structure that makes it rational for every participant to stay in the circle, even when they can see the guns. The Bank of England estimates the total build-out for AI infrastructure at $5 trillion, roughly half funded through debt. $5 trillion of physical infrastructure secured by loans that must be repaid in 8 years, justified by a revenue narrative built on 28 days. Could the centrifuge hold? Could the managed deflation scenario play out? A slow, controlled landing rather than a crash? It's possible. As Shakespeare put it, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. If the crash keeps not happening, I'm going to dedicate a future AI Crash Report episode, Apocalypse Never, to that exact question. Because intellectual honesty requires taking the soft landing case seriously, not just the catastrophe. But whether it lands hard or soft, the 2% still pays. So what do you do with this? One question. Ask it of any investment, any sector, any era. Who profits from the journey regardless of the destination. In 1720, the stock jobbers collecting commissions. In the 1840s, the promoters skimming deposits. In 2000, the banks collecting underwriting fees. And today, the venture capitalists collecting the 2%. If the intermediary class gets paid whether the destination is reached or not, the journey will continue long past the point of rationality. Follow the guaranteed fee. That's where you'll find the inflated asset. That's where you've always found it. So far, we've examined the gate, the psychology, and the money, 3 pillars of the architecture. But there's a reason nobody with a mainstream platform is laying this out for you. Next time, the wizard's curtain, what artificial intelligence actually is, what it can't do, and why the name itself is the most expensive piece of marketing in the history of the English language. I'm Julian Whatley. This is the Silicon Mirage, and now you see it.